"You're coming with me," said the cowboy softly, after finding her on the cold ground, her body. The cold was biting that morning. The plains stretched endlessly, a frozen sea of white under a pale gray sky. Snow crunched under the cowboy's boots as he rode slowly along the ridge, scanning the ground for any sign of movement among his cattle. His breath came out in little clouds, disappearing quickly into the icy air. Most mornings he rode alone, letting the quiet of the plains settle over him like a familiar blanket. The wind whistled through the open spaces, making the wooden fences creak, and the trees nearby swayed gently as if acknowledging his presence. He had been riding for hours, checking the fences, counting the cows, and making sure nothing was missing. The work was routine, almost meditative, but it also required sharp attention. One small distraction could mean a lost cow or a broken fence, and on a ranch as remote as his, such mistakes could quickly become serious. As he rode along, he noticed something unusual in the snow, an irregular shape lying near the edge of a small ravine. At first, he thought it might be a fallen branch or an abandoned bundle of clothes, but as he drew closer, his heart sank slightly. There, lying on the cold ground, was a young woman. She looked almost like a small figure carved out of the snow itself, pale and shivering. Her clothes were thin, not enough for the freezing weather, and they were torn in places. Her hair was tangled, dusted with frost, and her face was pale, showing signs of exhaustion. She wasn't moving, except for the small trembling shivers that ran through her body. The sight of her made something stir deep inside the cowboy, a mix of concern, curiosity, and an urge to act. He dismounted from his horse quickly, kneeling beside her without hesitation. The ground was hard and icy, but he barely noticed as he gently touched her shoulder. "Hey, are you all right?" he asked softly, his voice breaking the silence of the plains. For a moment, there was no answer, only the sound of the wind and the faint rustling of the nearby trees. Then, slowly, her eyes fluttered open. They were wide, filled with fear and confusion, and yet they held a spark of something else. Strength, maybe, or perhaps sheer will to survive. The cowboy didn't say much after that. He knew she needed warmth more than words. He carefully lifted her into his arms, feeling how light and fragile she was. She didn't resist, though her eyes remained wary, scanning his face as if trying to decide whether he was friend or foe. "You're coming with me," he said softly, not as a command, but as a promise. His tone was steady and calm, giving her something solid to hold on to amid the uncertainty around them. Carrying her back to his horse, he wrapped his own coat around her shoulders, tucking her in as best he could to shield her from the cold. The snow beneath them was deep in some places, and every step was a careful effort. The wind tried to push against them, and the cold burned at exposed skin. But he kept going. The cowboy didn't know exactly what had happened to her, and he didn't ask just yet. He knew that the first thing she needed was safety, warmth, and shelter. Everything else could wait. By the time they reached the small wooden cabin he had built years ago, the woman was shivering less, but still clearly weak and exhausted. The cabin was modest, just a small structure of logs and stone, but it had a strong roof and a sturdy door. Smoke curled from the chimney, and the faint scent of burning wood mixed with the crisp air of the plains. Inside, the warmth from the stove was immediate, wrapping around them like a hug. He helped her sit on a chair near the fire, pulling another blanket from the corner and covering her shoulders. He set about doing what he could to make her comfortable. He brought a bowl of warm broth, carefully feeding her small spoonfuls, watching her eyes for any sign of discomfort or refusal. At first, she ate slowly, almost mechanically, but soon the warmth of the food and the cabin began to seep into her bones. Her breathing slowed, and the shivering gradually faded. The cowboy sat across from her, keeping a quiet watch, his eyes alert but his demeanor calm. He knew that in situations like this, patience was as important as action. Forcing questions or rushing her would do more harm than good. Hours passed in quiet companionship. The woman finally spoke in a faint voice, barely above a whisper, explaining that she had been traveling alone and had gotten lost during a harsh snowstorm. She didn't reveal much, only fragments, how she had slipped on ice, how she had tried to keep moving but eventually collapsed. Her story was simple, but the fear and exhaustion behind her words spoke volumes. The cowboy listened, nodding occasionally, offering small reassurances without judgment. During the evening, he prepared a simple bed for her near the fire, using blankets and some old quilts. She accepted his help, laying down quietly, still wary but starting to feel safe. The cowboy remained nearby, tending the fire and ensuring the cabin remained warm through the long, cold night. He couldn't help but glance at her from time to time, marveling at how fragile she had seemed at first, and how she was slowly beginning to recover. In that quiet, shared space, a connection began to form, a sense of trust that neither could force but that grew naturally in the presence of care and safety. By the time dawn arrived, the first light of morning streaming weakly through the small windows, the woman was sitting by the fire, wrapped in blankets and staring thoughtfully into the flames. The cowboy handed her another cup of broth, and this time there was a small, almost imperceptible smile on her face. It wasn't much, but it was enough to show that she was beginning to feel the warmth of not just the fire, but also the care of someone who had chosen to help her. That day, as the snow outside glistened under the pale sun, the cowboy and the woman remained quietly in the cabin. He gave her time to rest and recover, fetching water, tending the fire, and keeping watch outside. He didn't press for details of her journey or her past. He only focused on the present, keeping her safe and helping her regain her strength. The woman, for her part, began to relax slightly, realizing that she had found an ally in this rugged stranger. Though they had only met hours before, the trust between them was growing, quietly but steadily. By evening, she was able to sit more comfortably, eating heartier meals and talking in slightly stronger tones. She asked small questions about the cabin, the cowboy, and the land, showing curiosity and slowly letting go of some of the fear that had gripped her. The cowboy answered simply, never overwhelming her, letting her take the lead in conversation. He had learned over the years that kindness and patience often worked better than words, especially with someone who had been through fear and uncertainty. That night, as the snowstorm subsided and the stars peeked through the clouds, the cabin felt warmer than just from the fire. It held a sense of safety and a promise that for now, the cold and danger outside could not reach them. The cowboy sat nearby, watching her sleep for a while, before he finally lay down himself. He knew this was only the beginning of a journey neither of them could predict, but he felt a quiet certainty that they had both found something rare. A human connection built on care, trust, and a shared understanding of survival. And so, the first chapter of their story ended not with words, but with a simple truth. In the cold expanse of the plains, two people had found each other, and for now, that was enough. The cowboy's promise, softly spoken as he had carried her from the snow, lingered in the warmth of the cabin. "You're coming with me." It was more than a statement. It was the start of safety, hope, and the beginning of a bond that neither could yet understand, but both would come to rely upon. The next morning, sunlight crept through the small windows of the cabin, casting gentle beams across the wooden floor. The snow outside sparkled under the soft light, but the air was still crisp and cold. Inside, the woman stirred slowly, wrapped in blankets. The warmth of the cabin had eased the worst of her exhaustion, and she opened her eyes to see the cowboy sitting nearby, sipping from a tin cup of coffee. He glanced up and smiled, a small quiet gesture that made her feel a little less tense. "Good morning," he said softly. His voice was calm, steady, and unthreatening, as though he had been expecting her to wake. "Sleep well?" She nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. I think so." She looked around the cabin, taking in the simple furnishings, a wooden table, a few chairs, blankets stacked neatly in the corner, and the sturdy stove that had kept her warm through the night. There was a quiet strength to the place, a sense that it had been built not just for shelter, but to last through the harshest conditions. The cowboy put down his cup and stood, walking over to the stove to tend the fire. "I'll get some breakfast ready. You'll need your strength today." He spoke matter-of-factly, as if this was something he did every day, which, in a way, it was. Life on the plains was full of small routines that mattered more than anything, and the cowboy had learned long ago that consistency brought comfort. As he worked, she watched him. There was a calm efficiency in his movements, the way he handled the wood, the way he measured the food, the careful way he stirred the pot on the stove. It was simple, ordinary, and yet it felt important in that moment. She realized that this man, who had appeared out of the cold like some silent protector, had a quiet strength that went beyond muscles or skill with a horse. It was the kind of strength that came from patience, experience, and a willingness to act when someone needed help. Breakfast was simple: warm broth, bread, and a little fresh milk from the cowboy's supplies. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, and he sat across from her, watching but not hovering. They didn't speak much, but the silence was not uncomfortable. It was a shared understanding, a mutual acknowledgement that words were not always necessary when safety and care were already being offered. After she had eaten, he gestured toward the small chair by the fire. "You should rest a little more. Once you've gained your strength, there's work to do. I'll show you how things are done around here." There was no hint of impatience in his voice, only a quiet reassurance. She nodded, recognizing that she had no reason to argue. She was still fragile, still recovering, and the idea of resting while someone else kept watch felt strangely comforting. For the next few hours, the cabin was quiet, except for the occasional crackle of the fire. The woman let herself drift between sleep and wakefulness, listening to the cowboy moving about. She noticed little things: the way he fed the horses outside, the careful stacking of wood, the way he checked the fences along the property line. Each small act seemed to carry a sense of purpose, a connection to the land, and she found herself admiring him silently. She realized that he wasn't just protecting her, he was maintaining a world that was steady, reliable, and full of care, even in its harshest forms. When the afternoon came, the cowboy suggested that she try standing. At first, she hesitated. Her legs still felt weak, and the cold had left her muscles stiff. But he was patient, offering his hand without pressure, guiding her slowly to her feet. "Take your time," he said. "There's no rush. Just one step at a time." She leaned on him slightly, feeling the warmth of his coat against her own. Step by step, she walked around the small cabin, then outside onto the snow-covered ground. The brightness of the day made her squint, but the feeling of solid footing beneath her feet gave her a sense of accomplishment. The cowboy didn't force her to do more than she was ready for. Instead, he offered small tasks that could help her regain confidence. She carried firewood from the stack to the cabin, helped fetch water from the small well nearby, and even brushed snow from the steps and fences. These were simple chores, but each one reminded her that she could still contribute, that she still had strength inside her, even if she hadn't realized it yet. As they worked together, she began to notice small details about him. His hands were strong and calloused from years of work, yet they moved with care and precision. His eyes were steady, observing everything without judgment, and his movements carried a quiet patience that made the world around them feel calm. In his presence, she felt protected in a way she hadn't experienced before. The cold, which had seemed so threatening just the day before, now felt more like a challenge they could face together. By mid-afternoon, they had finished most of the outdoor tasks. The woman sat on a log near the cabin, catching her breath while the cowboy tended to the horses. She watched the way he worked with them, his voice soft but firm, giving commands and reassurance in equal measure. There was trust between him and the animals, and she realized that the same kind of trust was beginning to grow between her and the cowboy. It was slow, careful, and fragile, but it was there. When he finally approached her, he brought a small bundle of food, some bread, cheese, and dried meat. "You'll need your strength for tomorrow," he said. She took it with a faint smile, feeling the warmth of his thoughtfulness. It wasn't just the food. It was the gesture, the care, the way he anticipated her needs without making her feel weak or dependent. Evening came, and the cold returned with sharper force. They went inside, stoking the fire and preparing a simple supper. The woman helped as much as she could, learning how to chop small amounts of wood, how to set the table simply, and how to tend the fire safely. The cowboy guided her gently, never criticizing, only showing her the way and letting her try herself. Each small success built her confidence, and she began to feel a sense of accomplishment she hadn't felt in a long time. After supper, they sat quietly by the fire. She sipped her warm drink, feeling the heat spread through her body. The cowboy watched her with calm eyes, saying little but giving her the space to feel safe and secure. The silence was comfortable now, a shared peace that wrapped around them both. She realized that for the first time in days, maybe even weeks, she felt a sense of normalcy, She was no longer a frightened traveler lost in the snow. She was someone cared for, someone who could rest without fear. As the night grew darker, she prepared for bed again, feeling the exhaustion from the day's work. The cowboy helped her settle under the blankets, making sure she was warm and comfortable. He stayed nearby, tending the fire and keeping watch, as he had done the night before. She looked at him and realized that she trusted him, that she felt safe in his presence. It was a strange new feeling, but it was comforting and reassuring in a way she hadn't expected. Before sleep took her, she thought about how much had changed in such a short time. The plains that had seemed so cold and threatening now felt like a place where she could begin again. She had found safety, warmth, and care in the form of a quiet, patient cowboy who had appeared when she needed help most. And though neither of them had said it out loud, a bond was forming, an unspoken understanding that they were beginning a journey together, one that would require trust, patience, and courage from both of them. The fire crackled softly as she drifted to sleep, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't known in a long time. Outside, the snow continued to fall lightly, blanketing the world in white, but inside the cabin, warmth, safety, and the beginning of trust had taken root. And in the quiet of that winter night, both the cowboy and the woman sensed that something important had begun, something that would change their lives forever. The morning sun filtered weakly through the small cabin windows, casting a soft golden light across the wooden floor. Outside, the plains were quiet and white, the snow sparkling in the faint light of dawn. The woman sat by the fire, wrapped in a thick blanket, her hands cupped around a warm mug. She was feeling stronger than the day before, but a lingering weariness still weighed on her. Her body had begun to recover, but her mind was restless. The events that had brought her to the cold ground were still heavy on her thoughts. The cowboy noticed her quiet demeanor as he prepared breakfast. He didn't push her to talk, but he stayed close enough that she could feel his presence. There was a comfort in his calmness, a sense that she could share when she was ready. He poured hot coffee into a tin cup and handed it to her, his hands steady and careful. "Take your time," he said simply. "No rush. Eat when you're ready." His tone was soft but firm, giving her a sense of security without pressure. She took a slow sip of the coffee, feeling the warmth spread through her chest. She looked at him, trying to find the right words to begin telling her story. At first, she hesitated. It was difficult to speak of the fear and struggle she had endured. The memories were raw, and the thought of revealing them to someone she barely knew made her nervous. Yet something about the way the cowboy watched her, without judgment, without rushing, made her feel that maybe, just maybe, she could trust him. Finally she spoke, her voice quiet at first, like a whisper carried on the wind. She explained how she had been traveling alone, trying to reach a distant town for work and safety. Along the way, a series of unfortunate events had led her into the snowstorm. She stumbled over icy terrain, became disoriented, and eventually collapsed. Her words were hesitant, but the cowboy listened carefully, nodding occasionally, giving her the space to continue without interruption. The cowboy didn't ask many questions. He didn't need to. He could see in her eyes the exhaustion, the fear, and the determination that had kept her going even when the cold seemed unbearable. Instead, he focused on small gestures of care, bringing her warm food, adjusting the blankets, and making sure the fire burned steadily. Actions, he knew, often spoke louder than words. And in these simple acts, he conveyed his willingness to protect and support her. As the day progressed, she began to feel a little more at ease. The cabin, once a strange place, was becoming a safe haven. She began to explore it slowly, taking in the small details. The shelves with neatly stacked supplies, the cozy nook by the window, the small tools hung on hooks along the wall. Each detail reminded her that someone had built this place with care and thought, and that thoughtfulness extended to her well-being now. The cowboy suggested a walk outside, gently encouraging her to get fresh air and stretch her legs. At first, she hesitated, worried about the cold, but he promised to stay close. Step by step, they walked around the small yard, the snow crunching under their feet. The cold wind brushed against her cheeks, but it no longer felt threatening. It was invigorating, a reminder that she was still alive and capable of facing challenges. During their walk, she began to notice little things about the cowboy. The way he moved with ease over the uneven ground, the careful way he adjusted his coat to shield her from the wind, and the patience in his tone whenever he spoke to her. It struck her that he had probably spent years learning to survive in this harsh environment, and yet he never seemed impatient or harsh. There was a quiet wisdom in him, a calmness that made the world feel less frightening. They returned to the cabin as the sun began to dip toward the horizon. The sky turned shades of soft pink and orange, and the snow seemed to glow with a gentle warmth. Inside, the woman helped prepare a simple meal, chopping vegetables and stirring the pot under the cowboy's watchful guidance. She realized that performing these small tasks gave her a sense of normalcy, a feeling she hadn't experienced since before the snowstorm. Each small act of contribution made her feel useful, capable, and slowly more confident. After dinner, they sat by the fire in comfortable silence. She sipped her warm drink, letting the heat seep through her bones. The cowboy, sitting nearby, cleaned and prepared tools for the next day. He didn't speak unnecessarily, but his calm presence made her feel protected. She felt a strange comfort in the quiet, realizing that sometimes trust could be built without words, through simple consistency and care. As the night grew darker, the woman finally began to open up more about her past. She spoke of her family, the town she had left behind, and the reason she had been traveling alone. Each word was carefully measured, revealing her vulnerability, while also showing her resilience. The cowboy listened, never interrupting, offering only gentle acknowledgement that her feelings and experiences mattered. For the first time, she felt that someone truly understood her, not just her situation, but the fear and determination that had carried her this far. He shared small details of his own life, enough to show that he wasn't a stranger but a person with experiences and struggles of his own. He spoke of his years on the plains, the hard work required to maintain the ranch, and the quiet satisfaction he found in his daily routines. These stories weren't grand or dramatic, but they conveyed a sense of stability and reliability. She realized that the cowboy's life, though solitary, was filled with purpose and care, and she felt grateful to be included in that space, even in a small way. Over the next few days, their routines settled into a comforting rhythm. Mornings were spent checking the horses and tending to chores. Afternoons involved walks, small tasks around the cabin, and quiet moments by the fire. Evenings were filled with shared meals and conversation, though sometimes they simply sat together in silence. Each day, the woman felt stronger, more capable, and more at peace. She could feel the weight of fear slowly lifting, replaced by a cautious optimism that perhaps the world could be kind, even after hardship. During this time, she also began to notice changes in herself. She was learning to trust again, to accept help without feeling weak or ashamed. The small victories, standing without support, carrying firewood, helping with meals, were becoming sources of pride. And the presence of the cowboy, steady and reliable, gave her a sense of safety that allowed her to heal. She realized that trust was not given lightly, but when it was nurtured patiently, it could grow into something strong and lasting. One afternoon, as they sat by the fire after completing the day's chores, she turned to him with a quiet question. "Why? Why did you help me?" Her voice was tentative, as if asking for reassurance she already hoped to receive. He paused for a moment, looking into the fire. "Because it was the right thing to do," he said simply. "Nobody deserves to be left out in the cold. And because you needed help, just like anyone else would." His words were straightforward, but they carried a depth of honesty and compassion. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mix of gratitude and relief. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to relax completely, knowing that someone cared for her without expectation or judgment. That night, as the wind howled outside, she settled into the blankets near the fire, feeling the steady warmth of the cabin and the presence of the cowboy nearby. She reflected on the past few days, the fear, the cold, the exhaustion, and realized that she had survived, not just because of her own determination, but because someone had chosen to help her when she needed it most. She understood that healing was not just physical but emotional, and that trust, patience, and care were just as important as warmth and food. The cowboy tended the fire one last time before settling near the door, keeping watch as always. He knew that danger might never return to the plains, but he remained vigilant, understanding that trust was fragile and had to be nurtured carefully. Outside, the snow continued to drift gently, covering the world in white silence. Inside, there was warmth, safety, and the quiet beginnings of a bond that neither of them fully understood yet, but both could feel growing stronger each day. And in that quiet, shared space, the woman finally allowed herself to feel hope. Hope that she could survive this harsh land, hope that she could trust another person again, and hope that maybe in time she would find strength not just within herself, but in the connection she was forming with the cowboy who had found her on the cold ground and carried her to safety. The days that followed passed quietly but meaningfully. The woman had begun to feel stronger with each passing sunrise. The fear and exhaustion that had once weighed heavily on her had slowly faded, replaced by a growing sense of confidence and hope. She could walk without leaning too much on the cowboy. She could carry firewood with steadier hands, and she could even help with the small chores around the cabin. Each task she completed gave her a quiet sense of pride, and she realized that she had been given more than just safety. She had been given a chance to regain her independence. The cowboy noticed the changes too. He watched her carefully as she went about her tasks, sometimes offering gentle guidance but never hovering. He understood the importance of letting her learn at her own pace. He also realized that he himself was changing. Life on the plains had been long and solitary, but having someone to share his days with, someone who depended on him yet also offered companionship, was slowly softening the edges of his loneliness. He felt a quiet joy he hadn't experienced in years, a warmth that went beyond the fire in the cabin. One morning, after they had finished feeding the horses and checking the fences, the cowboy suggested they take a walk to a nearby ridge. "There's a view that's worth seeing," he said simply, offering his hand to help her down the snowy steps of the cabin. She accepted with a small smile, feeling the strength in his hand and the reassurance in his calm voice. As they walked, the snow crunched beneath their boots, and the sun shone weakly through scattered clouds. It was cold, but the cold no longer seemed threatening. It was invigorating, a reminder of life and possibility. As they reached the ridge, the woman looked out over the vast plains. The snow stretched endlessly, broken only by clusters of trees and the winding path of a frozen river. She felt a sense of awe and wonder, a feeling that the world was bigger than her fears and troubles. The cowboy stood beside her silently, letting her take in the view. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but filled with a sense of wonder. "It's beautiful," she said. "I've never seen anything like it." The cowboy smiled, though his eyes remained fixed on the horizon. "It is," he said softly. "It's easy to forget how vast and alive this land can be when you're focused only on surviving. But there's a lot here to see, if you take the time." His words made her think. She realized that for so long she had been running, always focused on danger, on fear, on getting through the next moment. Now, she could begin to notice the beauty and life around her, even in the harshest conditions. Over the next few days, their routines continued, but a subtle shift had occurred. The woman began to take initiative, offering to help without being asked, preparing meals with growing skill, and learning to manage small tasks on her own. She found herself laughing quietly at little mistakes, sharing small stories from her past, and even teasing the cowboy lightly when he became too serious about chores. The cabin, once a place of survival, was becoming a home filled with warmth, companionship, and the beginnings of trust. The cowboy, for his part, allowed himself to enjoy these moments. He shared stories of his past, not grand adventures, but simple tales of life on the plains, of challenges he had faced and lessons he had learned. He spoke of the satisfaction of tending the land, caring for animals, and maintaining a space that could endure harsh winters. The woman listened, intrigued by his quiet wisdom, and began to see him not just as a protector, but as a person with depth, experience, and kindness. One afternoon, they were working together to mend a broken fence. The woman held the post steady while the cowboy hammered in the nails, their hands occasionally brushing. She felt a strange warmth spread through her chest, not fear, but a sense of comfort and connection. For the first time since her journey began, she realized that she was not just surviving, she was thriving, in part because of the cowboy's patient guidance and presence. The bond between them was growing stronger, built on trust, shared effort, and quiet understanding. Evenings were spent by the fire, sharing meals and conversation. Sometimes they simply sat in silence, each absorbed in their own thoughts, yet aware of the other's presence. These moments, though quiet, were powerful. They allowed them to connect without words, to understand each other through gestures, expressions, and shared experiences. The woman began to feel that she had found a safe space where she could be herself, without fear or pretense. One night, as snow fell gently outside, the woman spoke softly, almost to herself. "I didn't think I could trust anyone again," she admitted, her eyes fixed on the fire. "But I think I can trust you." The cowboy looked up from where he was tending the flames, his eyes meeting hers. There was no need for words beyond that moment. His calm gaze, his steady presence, and the countless small acts of care had already conveyed the message she needed to hear. She was safe, valued, and not alone. The days turned into a week, and the woman's confidence grew steadily. She learned to care for the horses, to manage small chores independently, and even to navigate the snowy terrain without fear. The cowboy continued to guide her, but his role shifted from protector to mentor, showing her that she was capable of more than she had believed. She began to take pride in her own abilities, realizing that survival was not just about enduring, but about learning, growing, and reclaiming strength. During one particularly clear morning, they went out to check the fences together. The sun reflected off the snow, creating a dazzling display of light. As they walked, the woman began to speak more freely about her past, her family, her hopes, and the dreams she had once held. The cowboy listened attentively, offering support without judgment, and she felt a deep sense of relief in sharing these thoughts. For the first time, she realized that someone truly cared about her story, not just her survival. Their bond continued to deepen through shared tasks, quiet conversations, and small gestures of care. The cowboy showed her how to prepare simple remedies for minor injuries, how to manage supplies, and even how to find small joys in the harsh environment. In turn, she brought life and energy to a solitary routine, offering laughter, curiosity, and companionship. Together they began to create a rhythm, a partnership built on mutual respect and understanding. One evening, as the sun set and the cabin glowed with the warmth of the fire, the woman realized that she no longer felt the fear and isolation that had dominated her life before. She felt a sense of belonging, of being part of something meaningful even in the remote plains. She understood that the cowboy had not only saved her from the snow and cold, but had also given her the chance to heal, to grow, and to begin trusting again. As night fell, they settled near the fire, sharing a simple meal in the quiet comfort of each other's presence. The snow continued to fall outside, covering the world in white silence. But inside the cabin there was warmth, safety, and a bond that had grown steadily over days of shared experience. The woman felt a quiet sense of gratitude, realizing that she had found someone who saw her not just as someone in need, but as a person worthy of care, trust, and companionship. In the weeks that followed, their connection became more evident. They worked together seamlessly, moved together in quiet coordination, and shared small, meaningful moments that deepened their trust. Each day brought small victories, small lessons, and small joys. The woman realized that she was no longer the frightened traveler who had collapsed in the snow. She was a survivor, learning to live fully again, supported by someone who had shown her the meaning of patience, kindness, and quiet strength. And in the quiet moments by the fire, she sometimes caught herself watching the cowboy as he moved about the cabin or tended the animals. She noticed the small details, the way he carefully handled tools, the way he spoke softly to the horses, the steady determination in his eyes. She realized that she had come to admire him deeply, not just for what he had done for her, but for the person he was, patient, reliable, and kind. The cowboy, in turn, found himself appreciating her presence in ways he hadn't anticipated. Her laughter, her curiosity, and her quiet determination brought warmth to his solitary life. He realized that he had grown to care for her deeply, not just because he had saved her, but because she had become an integral part of his world. Their bond had evolved from necessity into mutual respect, and from respect into something more profound, something neither had yet named but both could feel. As the night deepened and the cabin grew quiet, the woman lay wrapped in blankets, thinking about the journey that had brought her here. She had faced fear, exhaustion, and uncertainty, but she had also found trust, safety, and companionship. She understood that healing was not just physical, it was emotional and spiritual as well, and she felt a quiet hope for the future, knowing that she was no longer alone in facing the challenges of the world. The first light of morning spilled gently into the cabin, painting the snow outside with soft gold. The woman stirred under her blankets, feeling a sense of peace she had not known in months. Her body had regained strength, her mind had grown calmer, and her heart, once heavy with fear, now carried a quiet hope. She sat up slowly, stretching, and glanced at the cowboy who was already up tending the fire. The gentle warmth of the room felt like a promise, a reminder that she was safe and cared for. "Good morning," he said, glancing at her with a faint smile. "Sleep well." She nodded, taking a deep breath and savoring the warmth that filled the small space. For the first time, she felt ready to face the day with confidence rather than caution. The snow outside was deep, but it no longer seemed threatening. It was a part of the land she now understood better, a landscape that could be navigated with patience, care, and courage. After a simple breakfast, the cowboy suggested they check the distant fence line together. The woman agreed readily, eager to continue learning and participating. As they walked through the snow, the quiet of the plains seemed alive in a new way. The crunch of their boots, the distant call of birds, the soft whisper of wind through the trees, all of it felt like a reminder that life continued and that they were part of it together. During their walk, the woman noticed how skilled the cowboy was at moving through the land. He navigated uneven ground with ease, guided her carefully around icy patches, and pointed out subtle signs in the snow, animal tracks, weak ice, hidden rocks, that could be dangerous if unnoticed. She realized that he had not only saved her once, but had lived his entire life understanding this land, respecting it, and using its lessons to survive. She felt a deep admiration for his knowledge, but also a growing trust in his guidance. As the day progressed, a distant sound carried on the wind, a faint, irregular noise that made the woman pause. She looked to the cowboy, uncertainty in her eyes. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Don't worry," he said calmly. "Whatever it is, we'll handle it together." The calm certainty in his voice reminded her of all the ways he had protected her so far. Fear still lingered, but it was tempered by the trust she had developed over the past weeks. When they returned to the cabin, the cowboy suggested they prepare for the coming days by storing supplies and ensuring the animals were well cared for. Together they worked efficiently, each contributing to the small but meaningful tasks that made life on the plains manageable. She carried water, arranged firewood, and even learned to check the fences independently while he handled the horses. Each task was a small victory, a confirmation that she was no longer helpless or dependent. She was capable, strong, and growing more confident with each passing day. In the evening, after their work was done, they sat together by the fire, sharing a quiet meal. The woman looked at the cowboy and realized how much she valued his presence, not just for the safety he provided, but for the companionship he offered. There was a gentle strength in him, a patience and care that went far beyond what she had experienced before. And in turn, she knew that he had come to rely on her presence as well, appreciating her laughter, curiosity, and determination. As night fell, she spoke softly, almost to herself. "I never thought I'd feel safe again, or that I'd feel happy." Her words were tentative but sincere. The cowboy looked at her and nodded, understanding without judgment.
"It takes time," he said gently, "but you've come a long way."
"And you deserve to feel safe, and to be happy." His words carried a quiet truth, and she felt warmth spread through her chest, a mix of gratitude and hope. Days passed, and their bond deepened further. They continued their routines, tending to the animals, checking the fences, and maintaining the cabin. But now there was laughter and conversation mixed with the work. The woman had begun to share more stories of her life before the journey, of dreams she had once held and hopes she still wished to pursue. The cowboy listened attentively, offering encouragement and quiet guidance. Each shared story and experience strengthened the trust and connection between them. One afternoon, as the snow melted slightly under the weak sun, they decided to take a longer walk along the frozen river. The woman felt a new sense of freedom in the crisp air, moving with confidence over the uneven surface. She noticed the beauty of the land in a way she never had before. The way the sunlight sparkled on the ice, the gentle curve of the river, and the distant hills framed against the sky. The cowboy walked beside her, silently supporting her when the ice shifted beneath her feet. There was no need for words. Their partnership was evident in the trust and care between them. As the day drew to a close, a realization settled in the woman's heart. She was no longer the fragile, frightened person who had collapsed in the snow weeks before. She had survived, not only physically, but emotionally. She had learned to trust again, to contribute, and to find joy even in the simplicity of the plains. And she knew that much of this growth was because of the cowboy. His patience, his guidance, and his unwavering support had helped her reclaim a sense of self she had feared lost forever. That evening, as they sat by the fire, she finally voiced a thought she had been holding on to. I don't want to leave this place, she admitted. Not because I don't want to face the world, but because I feel safe here, and I feel cared for. The cowboy regarded her quietly for a moment, his expression calm but filled with understanding. You don't have to leave, he said softly. This place can be yours, too. You've earned your place here just as much as I have. Her eyes softened with gratitude and a quiet joy. She realized that the cabin, the land, and the cowboy's companionship had given her more than shelter. They had given her a home, a sense of belonging, and a chance to begin again. And in return, she had brought life, laughter, and hope to his once solitary existence. Together, they had created a bond that neither could break, a partnership built on trust, respect, and shared experience. The next few weeks were filled with small, meaningful routines. They worked together on the ranch, shared quiet meals, and spent evenings by the fire, talking or simply enjoying the warmth. The woman's skills and confidence continued to grow, and the cowboy's admiration for her resilience and spirit deepened. Their partnership was seamless, each anticipating the needs of the other, supporting one another without need for constant words or instructions. One morning, as they stood at the edge of the property watching the sunrise, the woman felt a profound sense of peace. She realized that the journey that had begun in fear and desperation had led her here, to safety, to trust, and to companionship. The cowboy stood beside her, his presence steady and reassuring. Together they faced the vast plains, knowing that the world outside could be harsh, but that they could face it together. In the evenings, they often reflected quietly on the past weeks. The woman would sometimes speak of the fear and uncertainty she had felt before, and the cowboy would listen, offering support and reassurance. They did not need grand gestures or dramatic declarations. Their bond was built on daily acts of care, shared responsibility, and mutual respect. Each day they learned more about each other, and each day their connection grew stronger. As winter slowly gave way to early spring, the snow began to melt, revealing patches of green beneath. The land, once harsh and unforgiving, now seemed alive and full of possibility. The woman felt a sense of renewal, mirroring the changing landscape. She had grown stronger, braver, and more confident, ready to face the challenges of life with the support of someone who cared deeply for her. And the cowboy, too, felt a renewed sense of purpose. His life, once quiet and solitary, had been enriched by her presence, her courage, and her trust. One evening, as the fire crackled warmly in the cabin, the woman spoke softly, almost shyly. I'm grateful, she said, for everything. For saving me, for teaching me, and for trusting me. The cowboy met her gaze, a faint smile playing across his face. You've earned it, he replied simply. And I trust you because you've shown me who you are, strong, capable, and caring. We've both grown through this journey. The woman felt a sense of completion, a quiet understanding that their journey together had reached a point of stability and mutual respect. She realized that she had found more than safety. She had found trust, companionship, and a sense of belonging she had thought lost forever.